So today we're going to talk about fine-tuning OpenAI. Last month we looked at some prompt engineering and we hinted that we'd talk about how to make the results even better using fine-tuning. Today we're going to talk about that. Next slide. So first, I'm going to talk just a little bit about fine-tuning, what it means, and when you might want to use it. And then June is going to show us the results of the experimentation she did since last month. And then we're going to tease what is coming up in the next 2 months. So fine-tuning, what does it even mean? We know that when we are interacting with a AI model that it has a bunch of capabilities based on its how it was trained. But just because it's good at a lot of different things doesn't mean that it will actually know enough about the specific thing we need it to do for the project that we're working on. Fine-tuning is a way that you can basically build on top of its general knowledge and give it some more domain-specific knowledge. The other thing that this is good for is styling the responses. So if the base model responds to things in a particular tone or in a particular format, and you aren't able through prompt engineering to get it to the style or format that you're trying to achieve, fine-tuning is a way that you can show it in these situations, respond in this particular way. So you won't need this in a lot of cases, but sometimes you might need it. So how does it work? It's really, really simple. You take human-generated or just vetted data. You package it in the exact same prompt response style you expect to give that the model later. You load it in, you wait because it has to take all that data and build a new fine-tuned version of the model. And once you get the notification that it's ready, you just start calling the fine-tuned version. And it can still do anything that the base model can do. It's just taking the fine-tuning into effect. We have on our next slide a screenshot of what this fine-tuning payload is like. And you can see it's really straightforward. You literally just give it pairs of prompts and what the completion would be. So in our fine-tuning payload, we had examples where we wanted it to answer no, and we had examples where we wanted it to answer yes. And we had generated that by June, going through and hand tagging a ton of data. So with that in mind, I will go ahead and now turn it over to June, who is going to show us how fine-tuning changed our results from last month. June?
Thank you. Next slide, thank you. So let's revisit our story. As a person on vacation, I don't want to see news headlines that are going to bum me out, so that I can get the rest and relaxation that I'm here for. One thing I wanted to mention before we move on is that the training data, you typically want, I think it's recommended about a few hundred examples. And we'll get into this a little bit further, but the distribution of that data also is very important. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at the results. Yeah, so this is our prompt that we left off with last time. You can see that before the training, we were doing a pretty good job of preventing bummer articles. But we were also hiding a bunch of positive articles. Now with this prompt, when we put it through the fine-tuning, what we got was it was overall better at showing and hiding combined, but it was a lot worse at specifically hiding. So because that's more important to us, in the case of cruise guests seeing bummer articles, I tried out some different prompts. So next slide, please. So this prompt actually did a really good job even without training. But one thing you'll notice is that we were able to get the positive articles through with training as well. So without affecting the ability to hide the articles as we were before. So you'll see in this example prompt, there's a lot more detail that we're giving the AI. So that's a thing that comes into play pretty often, trained or untrained. The more instruction you give the AI, the better the results will tend to be. And then on to the next one. And this one I just wanted to show was one of the other experiments. I just wanted to show sometimes the formatting can do very bad to just an untrained, like it has no idea what I'm asking. So in this case, it was just giving me empty results every time. But even with a weird formatting, if you train it, it'll actually understand prompts that it didn't understand before it was fine-tuned. So I just thought that was an interesting example to show as well. So the lessons that we learned, as I mentioned, you want a good prompt. And if you can't think of how to word things like I struggled with, because I struggle with writing anxiety, you can just ask ChatGPT, because who better to tell you than the AI itself how to talk to the AI. The other things to take into account are you sometimes need to give it very specific instruction. And again, the ChatGPT, that actually idea came from ChatGPT. It was like, tell it how to answer, tell it what no means, tell it what yes means. The other big thing that I mentioned a little bit earlier was the distribution of answers is also very important. So if you, I think I was working with at some point like 100 yes responses and like 14 no responses. And so because it was seeing yes most of the time, it just answered yes most of the time. Even when you're, when it's like the scoring data was a little bit more distributed. So that definitely comes into play as well. You kind of want to make sure there's enough training data for every kind of response you can get. And that's it. So next time we'll be discussing general tips and tricks. And then we'll be getting into chatbot with a specific knowledge base. So that'll be interesting, new, fun projects.
Thank you, guys.
That's very interesting.
I have a question quickly, which is that if you have 100, if you need to feed that 100 prompts, basically to fine tune something, does it still keep context? Do you have to do that with every API call? Or can you like send it a whole bunch of stuff and be like, can you remember this as context for everything else I'm going to ask you?
Oh yeah, that's kind of the idea of the fine tuning is as opposed to, like we had discussed before, putting each example of like training data in the prompt itself, you're basically generating a new model for you to use with that fine tuning in place.
So okay, so then the model will respond with the fine tuning in place, and for what, every session that you start, or
you use like a model ID. So it's
okay.
just you're referencing the model that you sent the fine-tune data to.
Interesting. So you can kind of have like your own models then.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. All right. Thank you very much, guys.